There is a quote by Sri Ramesh Balsekar, and he says, "No personal, individual effort can possibly lead to enlightenment. On the contrary, what is necessary is to rest helpless in beingness, knowing that we are nothing, to be in the nothingness of the no-mind state in which all conceptualizing has subsided into passive witnessing. In this state, whatever happens will be not our doing, but the pure universal functioning to which we have relinquished all control." The more we try to do something to become enlightened, the farther we are moving away from true enlightenment. Because we strengthen this separation between the person trying to be enlightened by acquiring a state which they think is permanent or would bring permanent bliss. Sometimes this need to quote-unquote become enlightened comes from avoidance of what is. And avoidance of what is exactly the opposite of what Ramesh calls as enlightenment. So when enlightenment happens, it is understood that there is no one that is enlightened, but a total acceptance has happened to the flow of life, where this separate entity is merely operating to facilitate the mind-body organism with basic functioning, which means that all conceptualization has ceased. So whenever the pain arises, the need to seek answers dissolves. All conceptualizations dissolve. All intellectual ruminations about what is right and what is wrong dissolves. It is the mind that is caught up in this dualistic split of right and wrong, what enlightenment should or should not be, how an enlightened person should or should not be. That is where the mind gets stuck and creates suffering. So it is not that the individual gets enlightened by some supreme knowledge. It is just that the individual has now ceased to operate with a sense of personal doership and has relinquished all control, as Ramesh says here. Which means that the daily life has become spontaneous. Every moment is accepted, whatever it brings, pain or pleasure. And as Nisargadatta Maharaj said, that pain is the eternal background of all pleasure. What seems as pleasure for most people is disguised. There is pain underneath. So when the mind ceases to put effort into trying to achieve something, a permanent state, then this mind becomes no mind, where this whole rumination has come to an end. And when this rumination comes to an end, what is experienced is peace in daily living. This is when things are seen for what they are, because mind is not superimposing concepts on what is being seen. We are not trying to assess who is enlightened or who is not, and what certifies enlightenment. Is there any permanency in any state? No. To my knowledge, I have not seen any permanency in anything in phenomenality. Manifestation, by its very nature, is changing. That is the only constancy of phenomenality. Change. So how can there be any permanence in any attribute of any human being? The stories have been misunderstood about sages when we say that there are sages who live in eternal perpetual bliss and that they are enlightened. Yes, they remain anchored to their peace, but they are subjected to the flow of pleasure and pain in life. They experience every emotion. They are not in a perpetual state of bliss. Bliss as we understand in worldly terms. Anyone who claims that they are in a perpetual state of bliss all the time are deluding themselves, because that is not how life is designed. Life is a roller coaster of happiness, unhappiness, pain, pleasure, happiness, sadness, It is this interconnected link of opposites which cannot be broken. So the understanding that every happiness comes attached with unhappiness brings acceptance of the phenomenality. And the acceptance of phenomenality, the flow of life, the way it is happening, is peace, is acceptance. Resisting the flow of life by trying to attain a particular state in the name of enlightenment, or thinking that it will somehow protect you from certain emotional states of the mind, is a fallacy. Because this human organism, this entity, does not facilitate for that. It is not designed in that way to shut down certain emotions and only experience others. So you cannot do anything to achieve enlightenment. And enlightenment is not something to be achieved. Enlightenment happens. And it happens when all effort is relinquished, when all control is relinquished. And that then what Rameshji says here is that pure universal functioning is happening through the mind-body organism. That means the impersonal energy, or let's say impersonal awareness, is acting through the instrument, the mind-body organism, to bring out the functionality that it is destined to serve. So if a mind-body organism is destined to create art, like painting, dancing, singing, or talking, then that is what the primal energy in manifestation will bring about in that particular instrument. And the enlightenment is total acceptance of that, total surrender to that energy. Any resistance to that energy is the ego, is the separate self, which brings about pain and suffering. Therefore, you cannot do anything to be enlightened, because there is no one to get enlightenment.